Superman, the quintessential superhero, the hero of all heroes, the symbol of hope that fights for truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. Created by two Jewish immigrants, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, in April 18, 1938, the creation would spawn a massive influence onto comic books, movies, shows. He is easily the most recognizable superhero in pop culture, but for some reason the majority of people don't like the character of Superman. Some going out to say that he's boring or that he's too powerful and doesn't even have a personality. Originally, I wanted to talk about how the media kind of ruined the character for a while, but I wanted to talk about why I love Superman and a lot of my favorite stories and moments with this character, as well as some of the best adaptations of the character. First and foremost, I wanted to be able to discuss why I love Superman and how it really started. For the longest, I didn't really care for Superman. I enjoyed characters like Spider-Man, Batman, Wolverine, Daredevil. But around 2 to 3 years ago, I got recommended one comic, All-Star Superman, which is pretty much considered the greatest Superman comic of all time. The basic story of this comic is, and without spoiling it, because I think everybody should read this comic, it's fantastic, that Superman is basically dying due to an overexposure of solar energy. He spends his final days tying up loose ends before his demise. I forgot where I heard this from. I think it was from a Reddit post or a video. Sorry for whoever wrote this. That the theme of the story is that no matter how hard or how dark things might be, there is always a way. And this is something that perfectly encapsulates why I love Superman. Also, issue 6 is probably the best issue in the entire comic, in my opinion. After reading All-Star Superman, I was on this Superman high. I picked up every Superman trade paperback I could get my hands on, reading Secret Origins, American Alien for all seasons. I read some of the Rebirth runs from Peter J. Tomasi and Dan Jurgens. There was also the New 52 run, but I wasn't that big a fan of it, though Action Comics by Grant Morrison was pretty impressive. There are dozens of other Superman comics I read, but the one that really stuck out to me was Birthright, a coming-of-age story that also sought to modernize the origin story of Superman. I love how Mark Waid writes Clark, and I love the relationship with his parents in this story, especially when it comes to Pa Kent. But my favorite moment is in issue 11, where Clark is getting beaten by these Kryptonian army that Lex Luthor created in order to villainize Superman and his race. We see Jimmy Olsen and a group of citizens going on to help him, and one of the things he says is that he's one of us. There's a similar scene to this in Secret Origins, where the civilians are willing to fight the U.S. Army in order to help protect Superman, and because they're on his side, because they show that he is not a bad guy, he's a good man. I love both of these moments because they both represent exactly the kind of character Superman is. He's an inspiration for people to become better, something that Secret Origin kind of excels at. When Clark arrives in Metropolis, everyone is kind of rude to one another. The city looks dirty, running down with graffiti all over. But as Superman arrives, people obtain this sort of hope, and that cruelty that people have are just gone. People become better. Their city becomes better. It's cleaner. Of course, for someone like Superman, he has had a lot of different adaptations spanning movies, shows, video games, animated shows like Superman the Animated Series from the 90s, made by the same people behind BTAS. While it isn't as strong as BTAS, it's actually still a pretty solid show. It's still enjoyable. You still get a good idea of Superman and his character. There was, side note, I think Gilbert Gottfried as Mr. McSpitlick was honestly fantastic casting. The most recent animated show was My Adventures with Superman, a show very clearly taking inspiration off of anime, which gives it a more unique feeling. Jack Quaid plays Superman, which, I'm going to be honest, was kind of odd at first, since all I knew him from was Scream and The Boys, two series that are very distinct contrast of what Superman actually is. But I'd say he actually pulls it off and plays a pretty good Superman, coming across as a more honest and honorable take on the character. It's a good show. I think I'd recommend it to anybody who is interested in Superman and also likes anime. Now, one of the biggest shows Superman has had was, of course, Smallville. And after watching, I believe it was all 10 seasons I'm not the biggest fan of this series. My biggest problem with it, and it's the same problem that I have with Gotham, is that it's a series that wants to make a Superman show without Superman. And throughout the show, you're getting introduced to characters that shouldn't even be there. We got characters like Bizarro and Darkseid and Doomsday, all without him becoming Superman. It's kind of ridiculous. I don't know why or what's the point of doing it. Just make a Superman show. I just find it ridiculous that they just chose to make a Superman show without Superman. But I will say Tom Welling as Clark and Michael Rosenbaum as Lex Luthor is honestly some of the best casting for these characters. Michael Rosenbaum especially, probably the best casting for Lex Luthor and the best writing for the character. Now, you can't really talk about adaptations of Superman without talking about Christopher Reeve. Reeve not only had the look of the character, but his charisma, honorability, humble personality, his ability to be able to switch between mild-mannered reporter Clark Kent to a confident, heroic Superman like a light switch will never not be impressive. My only problem with his films, and it's not really with him, it's mostly the writing, is that Clark Kent comes across as nothing more of a disguise, if anything. Not really much of a character. Some of the best adaptations of Superman also showcase a lot of his humanity, showing the kind of things that Clark Kent goes through. But for a film like this, I say it's excusable since it was one of the first big superhero films to ever come out. So honestly, it gets a pass for that. The only other actors to play Superman on the silver screen were Brandon Routh in Superman Returns, which was a sequel to the second Christopher Reeve films because the next two were so bad they got written out of continuity. And honestly, it's not really a bad film, but it comes across feeling really dull. It's really boring a lot of times. I'd also say the suit isn't that great. It has this really red brownish color to it. Unlike if you look at something like Christopher Reeve, which looks like it just came straight out of the comics. Another big problem with this version of Superman is his relationship with Lois Lane. For some reason, he has a kid with Lois Lane, even though she didn't know that he was Clark Kent yet. Which honestly just feels like such an odd choice. Now, I didn't really know where to put this in the video, but this is something that a lot of Superman adaptations, or at least some Superman adaptations that I have seen done this, was the fact that Superman gets with Lois after Clark reveals that he's Superman. Which feels like such an odd choice, because it kind of makes Lois look worse as a character, because it makes it seem as if she's only with Clark because he's Superman. If anyone's seen the Lois and Clark show from the 90s, which, I'm gonna be honest, is not that good of a show, it's kind of bad, does this also, it makes Lois look worse, because when Clark confesses to Lois, she says Clark or Superman, very much clearly saying that she's attracted to Superman. It's an odd choice. I don't know why they chose to do it this way. I guess they think Clark Kent is too boring. I don't know. It's just not. I've never been a big fan of this. Sticking with the Lois and Superman relationship, there was Superman and Lois, which was probably the best live-action adaptation of the character we've ever gotten, which is surprising to say considering it came out on the CW of all places. But honestly, it's a pretty decent show. It makes Superman actually Superman, the one that we actually been wanting to have on the big screen for years. And honestly, Tyler Hoechlin plays a pretty good Superman. His relationship with Lois is really nice. The flashback episode in the beginning was also really good, seeing how everything came to be. Also glad that Lois actually wanted to be with Clark before he revealed that he was Superman, which, thank God, again, it makes it much more solid. It doesn't make Lois look terrible. Both characters are great. The actress who plays Lois is also really good. It does have some of that weird CW writing when it comes to the kids, but honestly, the kids are fine. They're pretty solid. Don't really have a problem with them. But yeah, this is probably I would say the best live action adaptation of Superman we've ever gotten. Period. It's really good. And alright, I didn't want to talk about this, but I'm gonna have to do it because I feel like it's such a big thing to talk about when it comes to Superman adaptations, and that's Henry Cavill. Henry Cavill, who, I'm not gonna lie, isn't bad. Man, I don't hate Man of Steel. I think Man of Steel is honestly a really solid movie if you look at it by itself. Some things people like to complain about, which some of the complaints I can understand why they might not like it. His version of Superman is kind of stoic. It's very stern. It's not really much of a personality with him. But compared to BVS, he has more of a personality in that film than he does in BVS. BVS, I'm not sold on this version of Cavill. I think it makes him look worse. In this film, he's someone who's getting ridiculed by the public because of the Superman getting involved in a lot of problems in the world. People criticizing for that. There's even the whole scene with him in the courtroom scene. But honestly, I'm not a big fan of this version of Superman. I think Henry Cavill was honestly one of the best choices. Not doesn't he have the look. I think he could have had the personality of Superman. It just wasn't written that way. From what I've heard, Henry Cavill Superman was supposed to evolve in the course of this universe, and I mean, I don't know why they would choose to do it that way. Just have him at least get to where he's supposed to be in the first film and then go from there, because at the end of the first film he doesn't really feel like Superman. He is helping out people, he's in the Daily Planet as Clark Kent, but he doesn't feel like Superman, and that's my big problem with him. And this is another thing, this actually has to do with Superman, and a lot of Zack Snyder's big story points in this universe was when it came to the evil Superman trope. The evil Superman trope has been something that's been overdone greatly. Like, it's honestly getting kind of annoying. Now it's not so bad anymore. We're not really getting that much evil Superman. But back then, with Injustice, which I have a lot to say about Injustice, Man of Steel and BVS also kind of lean into the idea of Superman. Mostly BVS does it, and then we get to Zack Snyder's Justice League, which I do like. Zack Snyder's Justice League, I think it's probably the best one in that universe. But the evil Superman trope is something that is so tiring, and the way it happens, I'm not a big fan of it, because in this universe, the way it's supposed to end up happening is that the nightmare sequence that Batman has showcases evil Superman, and the reason why he becomes evil is because Lois Lane is killed by Darkseid, and Darkseid kind of like mind controls him when he's at such like a weak point in his life, because obviously, you know, Lois is dead. Lois is a big part of this version of Superman's character. Lois is a big part of all Superman's, but in this, she has such an important part in the story. So he becomes evil because of that, and I think it honestly makes it look, it's tiring, because Injustice does something similar, where it's obviously Lois Lane is killed, and Metropolis blows up, and then Superman decides, you know, to create the regime so that he can take things like in his hands. And my problem, I have more of a problem with Injustice, because with Injustice, it makes everybody, it's written where everybody is so out of character that it doesn't make sense, and they wouldn't do any of this. It's not even Superman. I understand Superman, you know, lost the love of his life, but even then, Superman has been taught that he would never, even, there's a point in the comic, I'll see if I can find it, but there's a comic book where Superman thinks Lois is dead, and turns out she isn't, but he thinks it, and wants to kill Manchester Black, who's making him think that Lois is dead. Lois, obviously being alive, and Clark being Lois being dead, and Clark being really mad, he loses control and tries to kill Manchester Black, but we only see that's in his head. He's not actually doing that, and we figure out that Clark, as much as he wants to, like, you know, have revenge for Lois, we know his character, he would never do something like that. He even says that Lois would never want him to do something like this, and it just doesn't make any sense when Injustice Superman would do it. Now, I guess you could make the argument, it's like, oh, because he killed Lois without knowing, which I think you could make that into an argument that, yeah, and also take the accountability that Metropolis got nuked by the Joker. But when it comes to the other characters, they also, they're written terribly. Nobody in this universe would act the way they do. It's terrible. I don't understand why people are so like so excited for Injustice 3 or anything about this universe, because it's just not good. It's all written terribly. Sorry about the tangent. I've never been a big fan of Injustice. This is something that I just wanted to talk about before I continue with Henry Cavill. Obviously, Henry Cavill was supposed to continue playing Superman, but it never happened. He was gonna come back after that whole Dwayne The Rock Johnson period with Black Adam, trying to set up a Black Adam versus Superman film without Shazam for some reason. I don't know why, but we were supposed to get that. It never happened, and Cavill was kicked out again, which I honestly feel terrible for him. He's someone, I still say this, he had the most potential to be Superman, and I feel awful for them. But James Gunn and Peter Safran came, I think it was 2022, both came in, both decided to become, or they were appointed the new heads of DC Studios. And a year later, we actually got a massive announcement of DC Studios' slate of films. Those films being, of course, Batman Brave and the Bold, the Lantern series, and of course, the big one, Superman Legacy, which is now being titled Superman. And a lot of people were not that big a fan of it, and they're still not a big fan of this film. Of course, because it's not Henry Cavill and it's not Zack Snyder. I do feel for Zack Snyder, as much as I'm not a big fan of his work. It's time to move on. We can't just be like so fixated on the things that he's done. As much as there are some things I like about his films, some things I don't like about his films, but I do think fans have to kind of let go of Snyder's stuff. We got the Zack Snyder's Justice League film, which was honestly a miracle that it even got released. It was a solid film. I actually enjoyed it a lot, but it's time to let go. You know, it's over. We have this new universe now, a new Superman with David Corenswet, who looks fantastic. He looks great. I hope it's probably going to be, I want to say definitive, but probably one of the best takes on the character. I have full confidence in James Gunn. He knows how to do this, and I'm pretty excited. And the funny thing about it is that everybody who's mad about, at least the Snyder fans who are mad about this film, it's funny to me because James Gunn and Zack Snyder are actually in really good terms. Zack Snyder is not mad at anything. He's just being a chill guy, he's just doing what he does. And James Gunn, honestly, he's even like gone out on record saying that he likes the things Zack Snyder has done. And so, you know, honestly, I think people should take some notes on this. They shouldn't just be hating on the film, especially people making ignorant arguments saying that this film is going to be bad about things that the film hasn't even been out. You can't really say, oh, this is going to be, the film's going to be like this. It doesn't make any sense. They're making terrible arguments just to make the film bad because they hate it. It doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous. I don't know why they're choosing to do it this way, but honestly, I'm excited for the Superman film. I think it comes out in less than a month, which looks incredible. Honestly, I haven't been excited for a superhero film in this long. The only other one I'm excited for is Fantastic Four, and that also looks solid. You know, honestly, after kind of making this video, which is honestly my first, I don't want to say video essay, but my first video on this channel talking about something that I actually like. It's kind of giving me more of a connection with Superman. As much as I love his comics, I've never really gotten time to actually talk about why I like Superman so much and how I really got into him. I know I talked a lot about his adaptations, but I feel like those were also something important to talk about because there were things that I was able to, see for myself, seeing this character and how much I've actually gotten to like view him in my time. I love Superman. He's a great character. Honestly, I think he's the type of character that we need nowadays because everyone, and I'm not even just say everyone, I'm also gonna say myself because this is something that we all have. It's something that we've been so cynical. We've been so cynical to everything nowadays that even when people try to be nice or try to be kind, we are always treating them with some sort of level of, or saying they're corny or they're it's unrealistic being kind. Everyone has to be either realistic or rude, which is funny because that's kind of how Lex Luthor is. People view hope as naivete, or it's that's why I love Superman, because that's the kind of character that we need nowadays. That's why I love Superman.